Hi everyone, this is Dr. Julie Dameron, local veterinarian for over 20 years. I am so excited about my new radio show, Tales and Tips, on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, Voice of Stockton, and KXVS Radio. I will discuss relevant issues affecting animals and pet owners today, how to avoid common problems, and how to extend the quality of life for your cherished companions. As a community advocate, I will also discuss important social issues that affect our city. I plan to showcase organizations and heroes who are doing amazing things to help others. Remember to tune in every Tuesday morning at 10, starting soon.
Do you want to relive the golden days of Stockton? Join Nate Knott on Stockton Alive every first and third Monday at 6 p.m. Tune into thevoiceofstockton.org.
My name is Miriam, and I am the voice of Stockton.
Welcome to KXVS, the voice of Stockton. And it's time for the premiere for our new show, Delta Flows, with your host, Barbara Barrigan-Parrilla.
Oh, thank you, Governor Don. Good morning, everyone. This is the show where we're going to discuss everything Delta. Delta-related issues regarding water, the environment, fish and wildlife, farming, history and culture, recreation, public events, food, and the arts. And we're so excited because we get to kick off this first show today with some special guests who are the organizers for the Sandhill Crane Festival, which will take place this weekend at Hutchins Street Square in Lodi. We'd like to welcome to the show Kathy Grant, Ken Nieland, and I believe we have Sally Shanks with us as well. Welcome, guests. Kathy, are you with us?
Yep, we're all here.
Okay, great. I'm wondering, can you give our listeners an overview of what the Sandhill Crane Festival is and what kind of activities will be happening this weekend?
This is Ken, and the Crane Festival is an opportunity for us to showcase the cranes at the Hutchins Street Square Community Center in Lodi, California. It consists of several facets. There's an art show. We have presentations from crane experts and experts in other areas of wildlife in the Delta region. We have an exhibit hall with exhibitors from both nonprofit groups and organizations such as Department of Fish and Wildlife and Sierra Club. We have activities for families and children. It's just a broad spectrum of activities, all focusing attention on the wintering sandhill cranes that gather here outside of Lodi from September to February every year.
Well, that's great. How many years has the festival been running?
This is the 21st annual Sandhill Crane Festival.
And can you tell us a little bit about the significance of this festival for the region and about the greater Sandhill cranes and their significance, I think, to the region? I think people don't realize what an important wintering area we are for these birds.
Yeah, this is Kathy Grant speaking. The significance for us personally as the committee is to make sure that the folks that actually live around the Delta, surrounding areas, understand the importance of the habitat that these birds actually need to continue to visit California. There's a great story about how the birds were not showing up in high numbers at all back in the 1940s, and maybe down to 5 pairs of birds. And Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game at the time figured it out that they actually needed a certain kind of habitat. It wasn't happening, too much farming in the area that prohibited the fields from being flooded up for the birds. And so the ship sort of slowly turned, and in 1980, The Eisenberg Preserve was bought on Woodbridge Road. The fields are now flooded up. There's about 300 acres for these birds. They've got staff there that is putting water on the fields. It's fresh water. These are riparian birds. They're freshwater birds. They need that water to land in at night, to roost in for protection. And then they actually go off during the day and forage in the local area. So this whole festival is about trying to help the people in the area understand the birds' needs so that we continue going forward to make sure that they have what they need, that it's not eliminated because of ignorance or poor stewardship.
That's wonderful. And for our listeners who really can't maybe just focus mentally on an image, you can Google the Greater Sandhill Crane Festival, and there are beautiful photographs. In fact, it's one of the items I really have enjoyed about the show. I've purchased artwork there that I have in my home, and I'm wondering if one of you could speak a little bit about the art show, because there's really some wonderful pieces every year.
Well, the art show is certainly one of the popular features of the Sandhill Crane Festival, and we invite artists to showcase not just images of sandhill cranes, but also images of other wildlife here in Northern California, particularly those animals found in the Delta. And the art show is includes photographs, it includes fine art, and it includes a bit of sculpture. We have some children's art on display, and as you mentioned, there's some beautiful pieces, very professional work that is displayed here. And the art show is opening this evening, Friday, and then it will be open to the public all day Saturday till 5 o'clock and all day Sunday until 4 o'clock. So we're delighted to showcase the cranes through art, as well as bringing people here to learn about them. And what I failed to mention earlier was a major component of the festival are tours that emanate from here at Hutchins Street Square in central Lodi out to the Crane Reserve and other areas like Casumas River Preserve up along I-5, where folks can actually come and see the cranes. Very spectacular early morning fly-offs or the fly-ins in the evening, and it's just an amazing wildlife spectacle that we have right here minutes from Lodi.
So, and that brings up an issue. I mean, there's a lot to do with the festival. There are activities, I know, for kids and for families. The festival itself is, if I recall, free.
Yes, it is.
Okay, except that you do have to pay, of course, for the tours. How does someone sign up for a tour?
Well, you can go online to well, you can't now.
Okay.
As of yesterday, you need to come to the festival. We always retain some tour space for festival attendees, but the tours do fill up quickly. So if folks are interested in going on one of the Sandhill Crane Festival tours, you can learn about the tours by going to the www.cranefestival.com. You can go to that website, but as far as signing up now, since the festival is upon us as of this evening, you need to come to Hutchins Street Square and sign up for a tour here.
Okay, fantastic. Question: you have other activities taking place at Hutchins Street Square for families and for children. I've spent many happy hours there with my daughter over the years when she was younger. Can you give us a schedule or a flavor of what will be happening the next couple of days for families?
Yeah, we've got quite a few things going. In fact, our brochure this year highlights family-friendly activities with a little icon. We've got wild animal shows on Saturday and Sunday. We've got taiko drumming sessions. We've got puppet shows. Miss Dorothy will be presenting both days. We've got rock painting, kindness rocks for people to actually hide. I don't know if you've been following the rock rave that's been going on in our country.
Right.
So we're going to actually have several hours of open workshop where adults can come paint rocks and then go off and hide them and hopefully those lots will drive people back to our website, and kids will learn about cranes. That's kind of the idea.
Okay.
But there's lots to do. There's the vendor hall, and there's also origami folding all day long. So I'm pretty certain a family could come in and be busy all day.
2 days.
2 days.
For 2
every
days.
day. Birthdays, yes.
For 2 days.
Yeah.
Great. Can one of you describe for us what are the numbers of cranes that you're seeing now that return because of conservation efforts that are wintering in the Delta area?
Well, this is Sally Shanks. The numbers got down to, as Kathy had said, 5 nesting pairs of graders. Now we have well in excess of 25,000 graders, lessers, and intermediates. So there's 3 distinct species of subpopulations of cranes. The highest density of the greater Sandhill crane is in the North Delta, Staten Island, Woodbridge area, and they move through starting early September. They'll build up to high concentrations of well over 20,000 in December, and then trail back down the end of February.
That's incredible. Can you tell us a little bit, Sally, about maybe some of the changes in farming that helped proliferate the return of the cranes?
Well, I farmed on Staten Island for many years, and what we did was, as we finished, looks like we're off.
No, you're with us. I can hear you.
Okay. As we finished our corn harvest, we put water from the adjacent river out and flooded our fields, and it was good for our fields, good for the birds. And the birds flocked in, and they learned we did this year after year. So it helped break down the crop residue, helped leach the salts out, and just made a wonderful environment for the birds through the winter.
So it was really a win for farmers and for the cranes?
Yes. It blended right into our farming practices. On Staten, we had 9,100 acres and probably 6,000-7,000 in corn, and we would flood up in the area of 3,000 acres a year and rotate through, almost like sheeping the birds across the fields.
That's amazing. It's truly a success story for the region in terms of good farming and conservation practices. What are some of the things you'd like to see happen long term with conservation for the birds?
Well, I think we have to consider multiple use on our lands, and so a program that works for both economically viable for the farmer and accommodates the masses of water birds migrating through is definitely the solution.
That's interesting and good to know. In terms of the festival itself, how many people come from throughout the state? It seems like it's always really well attended, and sometimes I think people here don't realize what's in their backyard and what draws people to visit the region.
Well, your backyard comment is very interesting because we do attract a lot of folks to the festival. A couple of thousand people will come and visit. We find that most of our visitors come from outside of San Joaquin County. 90% plus typically come from the larger metropolitan areas, the greater San Francisco Bay Area, Sacramento region, and we're always working hard to entice some of the people, like you say, in our own backyard to come and become more aware of the cranes that are so close to us here. This weekend, we're delighted to be able to showcase the cranes and bring folks out from other areas to the reserve, but the people locally can visit the cranes at the Eisenberg Reserve, at Casuma's Preserve out on Staten Island from September to February. And as Sally points out, that's when the birds arrive throughout September, and they head back north and north being everywhere from Northern California through Oregon, Washington, in parts of Canada, and all the way up to Alaska, some coming from as far away as Siberia across the Bering Sea. So these birds, for 30 million years, have been making the trek from their northern nesting and breeding areas to these wintering areas here in the valley, and we're just delighted that we're able to showcase the spectacle, but also, as Sally pointed out, learn how to better manage the habitat so that the birds will still find this a suitable place to visit every year.
Ken or Kathy or Sally, can any of you speak to how the birds actually return to a very precise location? Explain a little bit about how they imprint on where they return to nest in the winter?
Some of the work driving the Sandhill cranes, their numbers were threatened. The birds were marked with collars so you could identify one bird or another. And my personal experience is that the same birds would go to the same fields year after year within a few hundred yards. And when they would come down to Staten Island, you could hear them flying, and they would drop right into the field like they knew, okay, we're here, where's the food? And they would rotate around our flooded fields following our crop rotation, but all in the same vicinity. Then when the season's over, they start hopscotching their way back north and feed their way up through the Central Valley into Oregon. So the graders come out of southern Oregon. The lessers are all the way from Alaska, northern Canada, and the intermediates, sometimes called the Canadians, come out of Canada. And but they're all very traditional, and many species are species tradition, but Sandhill cranes are family tradition. Yes. So you'll see them in family groups.
Right, and those family groups migrate together, correct?
They do, and so they move around in the fields. So if you're lucky enough to spot a marked crane, and they mark cranes on their big long legs, so you'll see a combination of color bands on their legs, and you could come out the next week, the next month, and find those same cranes moving to a close by adjacent field, but rotating through the same general vicinity.
One of the things we've learned in doing our research for preparing documents for Restore the Delta is that greater Sandhill cranes, when they really imprint, when they come back, I understand that they land like within a 2-foot square area. So if you really change the area they live in, the circumstances, or the land rather, I mean, that it really makes it difficult for them when they return.
Well, that's the crux of so much of our concern over the tunnel project, is that it's going to go through Staten Island, which is the largest wintering destination for the greater Sandhill cranes in the flyway. And so it will knock out, they come back the same place. I spotted one bird, was marked in 1978 and still up in the 90s and 2000. It was still returning to the same fields on Staten Island.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What is their lifespan?
They could go up to 50 years, and they're very traditional family groups. If you go to the nesting grounds up in Oregon, you can see the same birds on the same nest year after year after year.
That is magnificent. It really does suggest that there is, familial connections between people and their environments and species that live around them for generations.
And what's interesting is that we can go across the field with a tractor, or down the road with a tractor, and they just kind of hop out of the way a little bit. they know when they're safe.
They know when they're safe. They know who they can trust. So it'd be great if one of you could explain really how this festival was created, because it really is a celebration of our, environmental heritage, and now the festival itself has become an expression of, our cultural heritage. Who came up with the concept? How was it created?
Well, about 22 years ago, under the auspices of the Lodi Chamber of Commerce, there was a Lodi Visitors Bureau, and in their discussions with various people in the community and beyond as to how they might attract more folks to the Lodi area, a gentleman with California Department of Fish and Game, now Fish and Wildlife, Bruce Foreman, suggested how about a birding festival, and pointed out the spectacular nature of this congregation of Sandhill cranes that's so close to Lodi. And so a group of folks were gathered together that might have an interest in that, some educators and conservation folks and folks from the Chamber of Commerce. Make a long story short, they decided, yes, we'll give a stab at organizing a festival. And in that first event 21 years ago, it was well received, well attended, and has grown ever since. It moved from a high school site back the first couple of years to this beautiful Hutchins Street Square Community Center, which is a real gem here in Lodi. And over the years, various features were added, like the exhibit hall. I think the art show was at the very first festival, but the exhibit hall was added, and certainly the speakers have changed, and we have a much expanded tour program. So the festival has grown and matured in those 21 years, and to what we have today.
And saying that it's grown and it's matured, you really have some wonderful speakers on the schedule. I see that you have, is it Dr. Gary Ivey, who is going to give a presentation on Sandhill cranes and the Pacific Flyway. Can someone talk a little bit about that presentation and maybe help explain to our listeners what we mean by the Pacific Flyway?
Probably 20 years ago, Gary Ivey came wandering through doing crane research down through Staten Island and the Delta. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s, when the birds were tremendously threatened. And so he came from the Malheur in Oregon, researching where their cranes were going. Well, it turns out their cranes were going to our Delta. And so that connection was made a long time ago. Gary's probably the preeminent expert on cranes of the Pacific Flyway. And he comes down and gives us presentations every year or so, and leads tours and updates us on the latest work from the International Crane Foundation and the status of our cranes.
That's wonderful. And for our listeners to understand, I think the way you should think about the Flyway is it's kind of a highway for migrating birds, the majority of them being waterfowl. And the Delta itself is the biggest stop for wintering birds along that Pacific Flyway. It's Sandhill cranes. We have heron. We see plenty of snow geese. Can one of you speak to a little bit about the level and volumes you see of bird populations this time of year?
Well, another interesting fact is cacklers, or the Aleutian Canada geese. They were at one point threatened. There were less than 7,000 of them. They're now back well over 100,000. Their threat was in the islands, the Aleutian Islands. The Arctic fox were eating the eggs. They took care of the Arctic fox, and now the geese have found their way through the Delta. They seem to like the same food that the cranes like, and they're out here like locusts.
Yes.
white fronts and the cacklers. The snow has come through later when the weather turns cold. We'll have a lot of swans. So if you're out on some of the islands looking at the variety of habitat, the water depth is the key to where they are. The swans are in the deeper water. Cranes are actually in the 3 to 6 inch water depths, and the diving ducks are in 4 or 5 feet. So when you do come out and tour, take a look at water depths, and that'll give you an indication of what birds you're going to find.
Oh, that's fantastic. We have a few minutes left. Is there anything in particular that's new or different this year that our listeners should come out and look for if it's been a few years since they've been to the festival?
Well, we're just getting a weather change, which is really nice. So that's going to drive the birds, move them around. It's enough moisture to put them out into some new habitats, but not so much as to bring in the fog. So we're looking for a terrific festival this year just because of this recent weather change.
Good viewing conditions.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, perfect. People should pack their binoculars, and what else?
Warm jacket.
Dress in layers.
Dress in layers, warm jackets, binoculars, a little sunscreen. It's still California. You don't always know what will transpire or what will happen. Let's see.
One other thing, I would suggest that you make enough time to spend time at Hutchins Street Square, enjoying the exhibit hall and the art and a lot of the activities that are here. You want to save time to go see the birds, but also to enjoy the festival activities.
Okay, great.
And just to add one other point, for those folks who are unable to attend the festival this weekend, just a reminder that the Sandhill cranes and all of the other associated waterfowl are here throughout the winter at these sites, and it's always fun to take a ride out in the Delta, whether to the refuge or just along some of the farm roads, and enjoy those birds throughout the winter.
Fantastic. And again, the refuge, you want to go out to Staten Island, the Eisenberg refuge in the Delta. Another place to start from where you can get guidance to go ahead and go on tours, of course, of the birds is the Cosumnes River Preserve Visitor Center, and they will direct people into the Delta as well. Do you have other suggestions, places to start from?
That's pretty. Those are the 3 main targets. They're pretty good.
Okay, real good. I really would like to thank our guests today, Sally Shanks, Kathy Grant, and Ken Nieland with the Sandhill Crane Festival. Thanks for taking the time for being with us. We hope all of our listeners really can make the time to enjoy the festival this weekend, to explore the Delta, and to have the opportunity to relish and celebrate our environmental and cultural heritage with the Sandhill Crane.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.